Here we are starting lesson 5.5, standard form of a linear equation. Up to this point, you've had slope-intercept and point-slope. Our objective is to write a linear equation in standard form and to be able to graph it. Here are our standards. What does standard form look like? It means that you're going to have an integer times x plus an integer times y equals c, and what c really means is c is a number. You want the number by itself. That's really what we're shooting for when we look at standard form. So relating it to the real world. Here's one example from the book, and they're asking you what each ordered pair represents. And it says an athlete wants to make a snack of peanuts and cashews that will contain a certain amount of protein. Cashews give you 4 grams of protein per ounce. Peanuts give you 7 grams of protein per ounce. How many grams of protein will the athlete mix contain? What do the points 70 and 04 represent? So if we're thinking about this graph, remember we're talking about the ounces of cashews and ounces of peanuts, and we're really talking about how many grams they provide us with of protein. So given the ordered pair CP that falls on the line segment, what expression represents the grams of protein in the mix? So if we're looking at protein in our mix, we're going anywhere from 0,4 all the way along this line down to the 0.70. We'll be coming back to this a little later and what our equation is going to look like. So a couple of key things we need to know is our y-intercept. On a graph, that's where the graph crosses the y-axis. So in your notes, make sure you should have already had that filled in from earlier, but now we have the x-intercept. And again, it's on the graph where it crosses the x-axis. Now, remember our y-intercept was the point 0, comma b, where x equals 0 and b is a number. In the x-intercept, we're going to call this a, comma 0. And what it really means is it's anywhere on that x-axis, which means the y is always equal to 0. In an equation, x equals, and it says fill in any number, so I might write in the number 3, y equals any number, I might use 4, I could use negative if I'm looking at this. And as we look at this, remember, x equals is always a vertical line. The x-intercept is the number in the blank. So that means that x would be at 3, y would be 0. Here, if it's a horizontal line, we could have the point where y equals 0. You could have for the y-intercept 0, 4. Remember our way to remember this? HOY, horizontal, 0, y equals VUX, telling us it's a vertical line, undefined slope, and x equals. So you need to put that down in your notes again. Right now we're going to try and look at our vocabulary sheet and in our notes, and we are going to be looking at writing standard form for an equation. It says that a, b, and c must be integers, and what that really means for you is you can't have any fractions or decimals. So all y-intercepts have an x value of 0. Where is it on the graph? It is on the y, if we are looking at it, y-intercept on the y-axis. If we are looking at an x-intercept, that's where all y values in this case have to be 0, and it is on the x-axis. So kind of keep this in mind. This should be in your notes now under standard form. And what we're asked to do is find the x and y intercept. So what we are going to do of each of these graphs to find the x-intercept. X-intercept, remember, is what they're really telling us is that the x-intercept is when y is 0. So if y has to equal 0 in this equation, we are going to put in 2x. Now, some people will put down minus 4 times 0 equals 8, but you really have 2x equals 8. Dividing both sides by 2, x equals 4. Our y-x-intercept, if we call it, and we don't really want to say x equals, but we want to actually write out x-intercept. Our x-intercept is, in this case, equals 4. What is that ordered pair? The ordered pair is 4, 0. Now we want to look at our y-intercept. Our y-intercept, if we are looking at that, is going to be when x is 0. So if x is 0 in this equation, I could write down 2 times 0, or I could just write, careful, negative 4y don't forget, this is really plus a -4, so we do have this -4. We're going to divide both sides by our coefficient, which is -4. And when you divide 8 by -4, our y-intercept is -2. So again, our y-intercept is -2, or it's the ordered pair 0, -2. I would like you to try number 2 and number 3 right now. The thing in number 3, you will get a fraction for your y-intercept, but it's not wrong. We're going to keep it as a fraction, or you could change it to a mixed number. Pause the video, and then you'll see my answers. You can now see some of the answers that I put up for you. As you are looking at those, again, remembering that your x-intercept and your y-intercept, as you look at these, for each of the points. We're going to go on to the next page in your notes as you are looking at this. So if you turn to the next page, the other key thing that we need to be able to do is we need to be able to graph a linear equation when it's in standard form. The key thing is you need to be able to determine your x-intercept, the y-intercept, graph them both, and connect it with a line. Whereas before we found our slope and y-intercept. So the first thing we're going to start out with is we need to get our x-intercept as we are looking at this. The x-intercept, remember, is when our y point is 0. So if we are finding our x-intercept is going to be the point when we are starting out with y being 0, which means x is simply equal to 6. So we are looking at the pair 6, 0. How did we get that? Remember, y was 0. So you actually had, if you wanted to think of this equation, x minus 3 times 0 equals 6. So x equals 6. We are going to go to the point 6, which means over to the right, 6, 0, and put a point. We now want to find our y-intercept. Our y-intercept is when x is 0. So 0 minus 3y equals 6. We're going to divide both sides by -3. When we divide by -3, y equals -2. So our y-intercept, if we are thinking about it, is at 0, -2. 0, -2. And we are now going to draw our line. And that is all you have to do to graph it. I'll often have students say, well, Mrs. Thompson, I want to check it, make sure I did it right. If you do want to think about a check, think about this. What is our slope? You probably want to draw a line a little more accurately than I did. Our slope here is up 2 and over 6. So 2 over 6 has a slope actually of 1/3. So 2 over 6 gives us a slope of 1/3. And if we look at where our y-intercept is a positive 1/3 x slope plus our y-intercept of -2. And again, you could plug in a point to check that if you wanted to, as you are looking at that. So other ways of rechecking it using our other forms. Your turn to practice. Graph each one using an x and y-intercept. What I should see in your notes, and you're really on page 17, I should see your x-intercept and y-intercept for each. So I want to see the point when y is 0, what your x is, and when x is 0, what your y is. This would be your x-intercept and your y-intercept. And I need that for each one of these. Then you're going to plot those points to graph it. Pause the video and do that, please. Remembering, horizontal lines always look like, if we are thinking about them, and this is where we think of our horizontal line, like the horizon. So if you think about the horizon, that is flat and it's going across. Vertical lines, if we're looking at an equation for a vertical line, remember, here we're always going to have y equals a number. Here we're always going to have, if you think of your vertical line or vertical jump in volleyball or basketball, we're always going to have x equals, and in this case, a number. So first thing you want to determine is a vertical or horizontal. Plot the points. So we're going to take a look at a few. What if it is x equals -3? Well, where is x equal to -3? Here's one point. This is at -3, 0. Remember, x equals vertical, so we think the line should be here. If we pick another point, this is at -3, 3, and we are going to connect those, and we have the vertical line. If it's y equals -2, y equals, always horizontal, look back at our notes, we're gonna go down to -2. It's like the horizon, y equals -2. Pause it and do the other 4 graphs, please. As you look at this next example, rewriting equation using integers. The first thing they did was they said, oh, we have this denominator of 7. We're going to multiply both sides of the equation by 7. Now here you are actually going to have to distribute this out. Now, what happens when it's 7 over 7? Those cancel, that becomes 1. One thing I might suggest to you is taking 7 times -3/7 x, and then putting plus 7 times the 5. Remember, sometimes to just multiply the 7 times every term. You get your new equation, we don't have fractions, and we add 3x to both sides to write it in standard form. Now, as we look at these equations, you want to make sure you're doing the same thing, standard form. The first one, pretty easy, try it. Pause it if you need to. In the first one, all you really had to do was subtract 2x from both sides. So -2x plus 3y equals -2. In the second one, we might first move our x term, which would then give us 3/7 x plus 1y equals -4. But we have to get rid of our denominator. How do we do that? We're going to multiply every single one by 7. If I multiply every single term by 7, my new equation is 3x plus 7y equals -28. I would like you to try it on the last one, and we will see that one in class. As you take a look at this problem 5, using standard form to model it. It says media download $1 each for each movie. So if we're thinking about writing this, each song is $1. Each movie costs, as we look at this example, 12, and it had to equal 60. So again, first thing you want to do is think of your x and y intercept. If we are finding our x-intercept, that means our x-intercept y is 0. X would be 60. So we're going to plot the point. The number of songs is up to 60. How many movies can we get? 12, y equals 60, y equals 5, and we divide. So once we look at that, we want to be thinking, is this actually going to be continuous or discrete? And it probably should have for this one discrete, because we can have points along here, but we can't buy half a movie or half a song. So this should actually not be a line, but should be looking like that. Here's one from your book. Video games, you earn 5 points for each jewel, 2 points for each star. Write an equation to earn the 250. Let's think about what are our variables. Our variables are the jewels, and we are looking at stars. So if you should write in jewels and stars, what is our equation? 5 points for each jewel plus 2 points for a star is going to be equal to 250. Now we want to graph it on your graph below. Remember, our title should be video games. Have a title. If we are looking at this, once we have our title of video games, make sure you put down here our x-axis. And our y-axis in this case is the stars. And think about the numbers you're going to have. What is going to be your, as you look at these, what is going to be your interval? You shouldn't be going by zeros because you can get quite a few of them. So think about that. Plot some points, and then I would like you to come up with 3 more combinations for class tomorrow. And again, if it helps you as you're looking at this, to come up with first, when we go to graph it, in our equation, what is our x-intercept? So if we are looking at this, you might want to think of this as really 5x plus, if we wanted to think of it, 2y equals 250. But the jewels was our x, and our y is our stars. And so now coming up with some combinations. If you come up with your x and y intercept, at least that's going to help you to decide first, what should my interval be as you go to graphing. Hope this made sense and you had a good lesson. See you tomorrow in class.